In this last film of Chelsea 2021, we get inspirations from the three very different RHS Gardens. This garden is a collaboration between the BBC One show and the RHS. Now, the RHS have sponsored or paid for a number of gardens here, three main ones, and this is one of them, and it's designed by Arit Anderson. And it's interesting because Arit is a presenter on BBC Gardeners World and other television series, and when you're a presenter and you're a garden designer and you actually exhibit at Chelsea, you really are putting your neck on the line because you've been talking about other gardens all the time and now you're doing your own thing. So I really feel for her and I think she's done a great job. And when I chatted to her throughout the build-up, she seemed to be hugely enjoying it and I think it's come together really well. It's all about hope and joy. And it is a proper garden in many ways that gardens aren't here, I think, because it is a garden you could definitely live in. It combines vegetables with ornamental planting, which I always think is fun and is lovely, and what actually many of us actually do. The sort of big features here are the lovely steamed wood sculptures, and they're brilliantly done. I think one of them is a swing, and then we've got a bridge, and then we've got a sort of nest seat at the end. And it's all very soft, curvaceous and flowing. The hard materials are Breeden gravel, which always looks much softer than paving. There are paved areas, but cleverly broken up with the Breeden and curves of wood. The apple trees, lovely little quite old apples on quite a small rootstock, so it's all quite small in scale somehow. The planting is soft, enticing and very relaxing. And the backdrop is actually not hers at all, that's another stand over there, but it really incorporates well. And at the end of the show, this garden is going on to mother and baby unit, which is jolly nice. It will give lots of enjoyment, not just to people here at the show, but later on down the line. It's a really successful garden. Well done to Arit. I hope we see her here again. This garden is designed by David Dodd. David hasn't designed a garden at Chelsea before, but he did build the Duchess of Cambridge's garden a few years back. And this is all about plant a tree for the Jubilee, which is the Queen's charity, and she would like us as a nation all to plant trees, which I think everybody agrees with. They've got a fair few trees on this site. My only reservation is that if we're going to plant trees, for one of these trees, I could probably plant 2,000 little trees because these big trees are difficult to move in. They take a lot of maintenance. You imagine bringing them in with big machinery, they're expensive. Whereas if you plant a little tiny tree for 20p, although it is tiny, I reckon it would overtake one of these trees in maybe 10, 15 years. It's amazing. They grow so much faster when you plant them small and they have a much more natural shape. And I think we all need to plant trees, but let's do it affordably and easily, because how many people could want or would want really to plant a tree like this? But enough criticism. I think it's got really nice touches. I love the bales. I think these are meant to be hay bales. Obviously they're made of wicker, they're woven and they're hollow, but they are so evocative of the countryside. Obviously at this time of year you wouldn't really have hay bales, you'd have straw bales, but that's a minor touch. And I love the path, which is a Fittleworth hoggin that runs through the site. It's a special type of sort of self-binding gravel that seals with clay fines in it. David's put a metal edge to it to make it look more modern. And if you notice, it doesn't go through on a curvaceous path, it's all angles and staggers, presumably just to add more interest. So it's a really interesting garden, again, because it's got a very good message. And the other thing, it is built with 40% volunteers, 60% paid labour. And I think that's a very good point, because the whole thing about Plant a Tree is to get volunteer groups to plant them throughout the country. And so they're setting the scene by using a high proportion of volunteers here. And actually it's quite difficult working with volunteers on a site like Chelsea because it's all so intense. And you have to really be switched on and be told and directed exactly what to do, otherwise it can be just a bit of an amorphous mess. So that's really good that they did take that on board. Apparently the Queen has planted something like 1,500 trees in her lifetime. Now I don't think she's actually dug the holes, but she has certainly sprinkled, hi Joe, but she's certainly sprinkled some soil on the top, and she has set a great example. But anyway, lovely garden, hope it gets a message across. Box balls, this is one of the very few gardens I've seen box balls in, because box is a bit of a no-no because of box blight, although you can use it really, because you can use the box blight resistant varieties. But I'm glad to see it here. I wish that so many people hadn't shunned it actually. Beneath the trees, the structural box combines beautifully with soft woodland planting to create a magical woodland canopy in a relatively small space. Nice garden. Difficult to design because it's a triangle site, and on this site there's no backdrop. The backdrop leaks out into all the other spaces. Every other garden on the site has an enclosed wall on at least one or two sides, and sometimes three. But this one doesn't. It's totally open, and so therefore it's very difficult to actually make a statement. But I think it's great, and I love the fact that the public can walk through it. This is another RHS garden, and it's designed to flag up climate change. There's a UN conference this year in the UK in October, November, the 26th one, so for COP26. And they brought on board Marie-Louise Agius and Michael Balston. Now Michael Balston's an old hand, he's been doing gardens at Chelsea, big gardens for many, many years, but this is the first one he's done for some time. But Marie-Louise has actually taken the lead on this, on the design, but they have worked together. And what they decided to do was to divide the garden into 4 different sections. The one behind me is all about decline. And I think that speaks for itself. You can see the sort of waste, the typical human waste, bits of old pipe, concrete, fetid water, bits of old twigs. And it's all the decline of everything we do to the country, although we do a lot worse. And the whole backdrop, you can see, is a big, big area of graffiti. But we'll go on and see the mitigation section, which is just up here. This garden is all about adaptation. So with climate change, we're obviously getting much more flooding, and then we're having extreme dry periods. And so here, they've got plants that tolerate flooding, and also they actually use the landscape with lots of hard rocks and pebbles and gravels, so it can take the water away into the ground quite quickly. And so the plants are things like, you've got this very unusual acanthus here, which I've never seen before, which is rather stunning. They've got yuccas, they've got echeveras, they've got geranium madriennes, thymes, all studded throughout. And I think this is my favourite sector of the whole garden. So from adaptation, we then go on to the section which shows how we can mitigate the effects of climate change. So in the mitigation area, it shows how we can help alter the effects of climate change. So we all want to compost our own stuff. So they've made this nifty little composting bin out of old pallets. They then have got these demonstration pots, which show sort of the rock, the subsoil, and then finally the topsoil. Now, there's been a dispute over this, because I don't really think it tells the public coming onto this what exactly this shows. But you're not allowed to label things on RHS Gardens, so we're not allowed to put labels in. They might change their mind before Monday or hopefully Tuesday when the public come in, because although they look okay, I wouldn't have a clue as to what they're all about. But growing along the bottom of them, they've got this green manure. So this is where you grow plants, often nitrogen fixing plants, and then you turn them into the soil and you enrich the soil by doing that. It's sort of a natural way to add green manure. Now, not everybody is a big fan of it, but some people think it's wonderful. The problem being in that you have to dig it in, in order to kill the weeds, and by digging it in, you're actually reducing the microorganisms in that top 6 millimetres topsoil, which is so important. They've got water here, and obviously water is really key with mitigation because it encourages wildlife. They've got a marshy area, they've got wildflower meadow, they've got long grass. So it's a very natural, ecological, easy on the eye, friendly little garden. And for my mind, these two spaces work the best. And then finally, we come on to balance, which is the last of the four. But linking the four separate gardens is this curving walkway. And all the RHS gardens that are done with the RHS have walkways through them. So that's the difference really mainly between the show gardens, which you never are allowed on, you just view it from the outside as a member of the public, to the RHS sponsored gardens, which you actually walk through. And also with the RHS gardens, they're not judged. So this won't be judged, it's just to educate and inform and entertain the public. And obviously a lot of them this year are very much on climate change and things like that and ecological aspects. So let's go on and look at the final section of these gardens. So this is all about balance, and this is a modern take on a cottage garden, and it shows us how we can work with nature, give us what we want from the garden, but actually be insect friendly, wildlife friendly, how we can grow vegetables. And it's just a very simple little cottage garden, and it forms the end of the series of 4 gardens. It's an interesting message which they're putting across. It's a message which many gardens are driving home this year: sustainability, climate change, things like that. It's interesting. I'm not sure people will really understand what it's about. They've got QR codes on the posts, so you can put your phone on them and read what it's all about. But don't forget, the average age of the RHS member is something like 60, 65. And when the show opens, this will be pressed with lines of people against the edges. And whether you actually manage to get to one of those posts to press in the QR code, I don't know. I think they should really change their ruling on this sort of garden, because it's to educate and inform, and a few signs and pointers would actually be helpful. And I don't think it would detract too much from the garden, but just bring to life what it's all about to those who might not be so genned up on it all. Well, press day brought the usual razzmatazz and celebrities.
I suppose you put it like that.
And Chelsea's first ever autumn schedule has been a huge success for the show.